They ruled streets with fear, but couldn't operate a phone without calling 911 on themselves. This isn't the mafia you've seen in movies. This is the raw, ridiculous reality they hoped you'd never find out. Mobsters busted by pastry cravings, botched disguises, and a YouTube cooking channel? Yeah, it gets that dumb. You're about to witness the most embarrassingly stupid moments in mafia history. And once you do, the myth of the criminal mastermind will never look the same again. 1. We've all had that moment of pure panic. The accidental butt dial to an ex, your boss, your mom. But a low-level mobster from New Jersey decided to take that game to the pro league. This dude accidentally called 911 from his pocket while he and his crew were casually discussing their criminal enterprise, including, planning a murder or two. He didn't just call the cops. He gave them a front-row seat to a live-streamed podcast titled, How to Be a Terrible Criminal. You have to imagine the 911 dispatcher putting them on speaker for the whole office, like, "You guys gotta hear this, Brenda's making popcorn." This guy single-handedly invented the concept of self-snitching. He provided the motive, the means, and the full confession, all neatly packaged in one accidental phone call. He was the rat, and his phone was the informant, making it the easiest police investigation in human history. 2. Being a high-ranking mobster under FBI surveillance requires a certain level of finesse and subtlety. Anthony "Tony Boy" Zinzi had the subtlety of a monster truck rally in a library. While the feds were watching his every move, Tony Boy got a craving for some quality entertainment. So he strolled into a store and shoplifted a DVD. The movie he risked his freedom for? Goodfellas. Let that sink in for a second. This is like a shark getting arrested for stealing the movie Jaws. The FBI agents must have been crying with laughter in their surveillance van. He risked decades in federal prison for a $10 disc. The universe has a strange sense of humor, but this was a straight-up punchline delivered directly to law enforcement. A mobster, being watched by the cops, stole a movie about mobsters. You can't write comedy this perfect. 3. A good disguise should make you blend in, become invisible. Salvatore, Sammy the Horse. Galante's disguise made him stand out like a Sasquatch at a dog show. In an attempt to lose a police tail, Sammy the Horse put on a woman's wig and a lovely floral dress. A solid plan, except for a few minor details. Sammy was 6'3", weighed 285 pounds, and rocked a mustache that looked like two squirrels fighting on his upper lip. He looked less like an inconspicuous woman and more like a linebacker who lost a bet. The one thing he needed to change, the mustache, he kept. The cops didn't just spot him. He became a local landmark. They probably started giving directions based on him. Yeah, take a left at the giant hairy dude in the sundress. If you hit the guy who looks like a confused bear in drag, you've gone too far. 4. In what sounds like a rejected script for a Looney Tunes episode, a mobster named Vincenzo Curry, whose nickname was Vinnie the Fish, decided to rob a fish market. He walked in trying to look all tough and menacing, gun out, ready to be a big shot. And then, because the universe loves irony, he immediately slipped on the wet floor because, well, it's a fish market. He went down with all the grace of a bowling ball on ice, his gun skittering away into a pile of shrimp. Before he could even say "Mamma Mia," the fishmongers he was trying to rob piled on top of him and tied him up. He wasn't taken down by a SWAT team. He was neutralized by a bunch of guys in aprons who smelled faintly of salmon. His own brand identity betrayed him in the most hilarious way possible. 5. A hitman for the Colombo family was all set for a professional, quiet assassination. He had the target, the location, the getaway car. He was a real pro, except for one tiny, crucial detail from his shopping trip. When it came time to screw the silencer onto his pistol for that classic movie-style puffed puffed, he discovered the threads didn't match. He bought the wrong model. This is the organized crime equivalent of showing up to build an IKEA bookshelf with a Phillips screwdriver when you need an Allen key. Imagine the sheer, silent frustration of that moment. You're hyped up, you're ready for some wet work, and you're thwarted by bad product design. He had to abort a mob hit because of an equipment compatibility issue. What's next? Calling off a shakedown because your Wi-Fi is down? 6. If you're a wanted fugitive, your to-do list should be pretty short. Number 1. Do not get caught. What shouldn't be on that list? Updating your Facebook status every 10 minutes. An Italian mafioso who was on the run for years just couldn't resist the sweet allure of social media clout. His desire for likes was apparently stronger than his desire for freedom. He was posting food pics from his hideout, vacation selfies, probably even inspirational quotes over a sunset. He was basically creating a digital breadcrumb trail right to his front door, tagged with "Fugitive Life Blessed." The police didn't need a high-tech surveillance unit. They just needed an intern with a Facebook account. He wasn't outsmarted by a rival gang. He was brought down because he was too thirsty for likes. 7. Every family has that one relative who becomes a legend for all the wrong reasons. For the Philly mob, that was Salvatore "Chucky" Merlino. After what we can only assume was a legendary amount of booze, Chucky was arrested for a DUI. But he wasn't swerving in a Lincoln Continental. No, this absolute genius was pulled over while driving a lawnmower on a public highway. This is peak hold my beer and watch this energy. He was treating a John Deere like it was a Harley Davidson, chugging along in the slow lane while 18-wheelers blasted past him. This wasn't just a crime. It was a cry for help that smelled like cheap whiskey and freshly cut grass. You know you've made some poor life choices when your getaway vehicle has a maximum speed of 5 miles per hour, and its primary function is to trim your front yard. 8. When you work for a guy named Tony the Ant Spilatro, you're expected to be intimidating. Frank Collada's disguise for a robbery was intimidatingly bad. His brilliant plan to hide his identity involved a fake mustache that looked like it was shedding, and a wig that appeared to be a dead animal he found on the road. It was so transparently awful, so laughably low effort, that a witness immediately identified him, probably because they thought, who else would wear a disguise that stupid? It was less of a mask and more of a party favor. He might as well have worn a t-shirt that said, "I'm definitely not Frank Collada, please ignore my face." The disguise itself was a bigger crime than the robbery he was attempting. He wasn't a master of disguise, he was a master of disaster. 9. When you hear active mobster, you probably picture a guy in his prime, full of vigor and menace. You don't picture a grandpa who needs a nap right in the middle of a workday. But meet John Sonny Francesi, who at the ripe old age of 93 was still technically on the job as an underboss. His last great act of gangsterism was attempting to shake down a New York strip club. But in the middle of laying down the law, Sonny did what any 93-year-old would do after a long day. He fell asleep. Right there, mid-shakedown. The guys he was trying to intimidate must have been incredibly confused. Are we supposed to be scared? Should we get him a blanket? It's the least intimidating power move in the history of organized crime. This wasn't a power nap. It was a career-ending snooze that led directly to the FBI using the recording of his snoring as evidence in his final conviction. 10. In the golden age of reality TV, it seemed like everyone wanted their own show, a chance at 15 minutes of fame. Even apparently, the guys who were supposed to live their entire lives in the shadows. Louis Big Lou Valerio, a bona fide mafioso, decided he was ready for his close-up and auditioned for a pilot about the mob lifestyle. To prove his authenticity and street cred to the producers, he basically gave them a masterclass in mob secrets, spilling beans that had been hermetically sealed for decades. The show, predictably, was a spectacular flop and never even aired. But the pilot episode? Oh, it found an audience. A very dedicated, very attentive audience at the FBI. They got their hands on the footage and used it to build a rock-solid case against him. He traded the sacred code of silence for a shot at becoming the next Snooki and ended up getting a long-term, all-inclusive contract with the federal prison system. 11. When you're a high-ranking boss in the Camorra and you're on the run from the entire Italian state, your list of priorities should be pretty simple. Stay hidden, don't get caught, stay alive. But for one boss, Ferdinando Schirano, There was a third, far more pressing priority: maintaining a killer, year-round tan. Despite being one of Italy's most wanted men, Cyrano simply could not give up his regular visits to his favorite tanning salon. His vanity was literally his Achilles heel. The police, knowing his pathological obsession with looking like a bronzed god, didn't have to launch a nationwide manhunt. They just had to stake out the place with the best UV beds in Naples. You can just picture him, lying there blissfully, thinking about his criminal empire, while the cops are waiting outside to arrest his perfectly moisturized, golden brown self. He chose looking good over freedom, a decision that is both tragic and hysterically stupid. 12. The Witness Protection Program has one very simple, non-negotiable rule. You tell the government everything you know, every dirty little secret, and in return, you get a new life as a Cinnabon manager in Nebraska. Frank Salem, a powerful Boston mob boss, seemed to have missed the "tell us absolutely everything or the deal is off" part of the contract. After entering the program and starting his new life, the authorities discovered he'd conveniently forgotten to mention a tiny, insignificant detail from his past: the fact that he'd personally strangled a nightclub owner to death. That's not like forgetting where you left your keys. That's like forgetting an entire season of a TV show where you were the main character and the plot was murder. When confronted, you can almost hear him saying, "Oh, that murder? My bad. It totally slipped my mind." Unsurprisingly, the feds revoked his get-out-of-jail-free card immediately. 13. For some people, fashion is life. For one Philadelphia hitman, fashion was, quite literally, a life sentence. After a mob hit, the police had very little to go on. No witnesses who would talk, no fingerprints, just some grainy surveillance footage. But on that footage, they saw the killer's feet, and those feet were sporting a pair of unique, ridiculously expensive, high-end sneakers. His impeccable taste in footwear became his undoing. The feds didn't need to track down a seasoned criminal. They just needed to find the one guy in Philly with a $1,000 sneaker habit and a known affiliation with organized crime. He literally walked into a life sentence because he couldn't bring himself to wear a cheap, untraceable pair of shoes for a murder. His style was so loud it screamed, "I'm the killer," louder than any eyewitness ever could. His fashion statement became the prosecutor's closing statement. 14. As the mob begrudgingly entered the digital age, you'd think they would at least try to take cybersecurity seriously. A certain captain in the Bonanno crime family did not get that memo. He kept all his sensitive financial records. We're talking illegal rackets, shakedown payments, the entire illegal ledger, in a single password-protected computer file. When the FBI arrested him and seized his computer, they hit a digital wall. The captain, under immense pressure, couldn't remember the password. He was probably sweating, trying to recall his daughter's birthday or his favorite horse. After a while, the FBI's tech guys, likely out of sheer boredom, probably just tried the dumbest, most obvious thing they could think of. The password protecting an entire criminal enterprise? Password 123. It's so monumentally stupid it's almost brilliant, except it's not. It's just really, really stupid. 15. For 30 long years, Vincent the Chin Gigante played the long game, attempting to convince the entire world he was clinically insane to avoid prosecution. His performance was legendary, a masterclass in dedication. He'd wander the streets of New York in a tattered bathrobe and slippers, unshaven, muttering to himself, looking like he was one step away from arguing with a fire hydrant. He was the Daniel Day-Lewis of organized crime, a method actor completely committed to his role. His own crew had to hold secret meetings while he was supposedly taking a shower, just to maintain the elaborate illusion for the FBI bugs. But eventually, the feds got tired of the Broadway show. They gathered enough evidence to prove he was as sane as anyone, just with a better wardrobe for lounging. He didn't get an Oscar for his performance, but he did get a starring role in a federal prison cell for the rest of his life. 16. The mob's code of silence, omertà, is supposed to be their most sacred, unbreakable rule. Angelo Ruggiero, John Gotti's underboss, treated it more like a gentle suggestion that he was free to ignore. The FBI planted a bug in his home telephone, and what they got was a content goldmine beyond their wildest dreams. The man would not shut up. He talked about everything: murder plots, scams, his personal beef with other mobsters, probably his favorite pasta recipe. He was a one-man WikiLeaks for the Gambino crime family. The FBI agents assigned to listen to the tapes probably knew more about him than his own wife. They didn't have to conduct a complex investigation. They just had to sit back, press record, and let Angelo's mouth do all the work for them. His non-stop chatter was the single greatest gift he could have ever given to federal prosecutors. 17. You would think the #1 rule of being in a secret criminal organization is don't write down the secret criminal rules. But for one top Italian boss, this concept was apparently too advanced. When police raided the home of Salvatore Lo Piccolo, a high-ranking Sicilian mafioso, they didn't just find guns and cash. They found a typed, laminated list titled The 10 Commandments of Being a Good Wise Guy. The list included helpful tips like, don't look at your friends' wives, and always be on time for appointments. It was less of a sinister code and more of a corporate HR manual for gangsters. You can just imagine the cops reading it out loud in the evidence room, barely able to contain their laughter. He literally created a cheat sheet for the prosecution. Rule number 11 should have been, don't create a cheat sheet. 18. John Gotti, the infamous Dapper Don, loved the media, and the media loved him right back. He was a rock star of the mob world, always dressed to the nines, always ready with a witty quote for the cameras. His ego was so massive, it could have its own zip code. Unfortunately for him, the FBI also loved his media addiction. While Gotti was busy preening for reporters and cultivating his public image as an untouchable Teflon Don, the feds were quietly planting bugs everywhere he went. His endless bragging, his loud proclamations of power, and his inability to just shut up were all captured on tape. He practically live-streamed his own downfall. His ego was writing checks that his entire criminal enterprise couldn't cash, and the feds were more than happy to be the ones to collect. 19. The story of Al Capone is a timeless classic of criminal stupidity. Here is a man who built a multi-million-dollar empire on bootlegging, gambling, and violence. He was one of the most powerful and feared men in America, responsible for countless crimes. And what finally brought him down? What was the brilliant police work that ended his reign of terror? He didn't pay his taxes. It's the ultimate facepalm moment in mob history. He outsmarted rival gangs, bought off politicians, and had an army of lawyers, but he couldn't figure out how to fill out a 1040 form. It's the equivalent of successfully robbing Fort Knox and then getting arrested for double parking your getaway car. He created a legacy of bloodshed and fear, only to be taken down by a bunch of accountants in green visors. 20. They say every man has his weakness. For some, it's greed. For others, it's power. For Gennaro, Jerry Lang Langella, a high-ranking boss in the Colombo family, it was pastries. Specifically, a certain type of Italian pastry from a particular bakery in his neighborhood. The FBI, knowing they were dealing with a man of refined, sugary tastes, didn't need to orchestrate a complex sting operation. They just needed to learn his snack schedule. They knew his craving for a cannoli or a sfogliatella was so powerful, so irresistible, that he couldn't stay away. So they simply waited for him at the bakery. He was arrested with powdered sugar still on his fingertips, a victim of his own sweet tooth. It's hard to look intimidating in handcuffs when you've just been busted mid-pastry. 21. The 1978 Lufthansa heist was one of the biggest cash robberies in American history. It was a masterpiece of planning and execution. The aftermath, however, was a masterclass in terrible human resources management. The mastermind, Jimmy the Gent Burke, decided that the best way to ensure silence among his crew was to, well, permanently silence them. He began systematically murdering almost everyone involved in the heist to eliminate loose ends. This, as you might imagine, drew a tremendous amount of unwanted attention from law enforcement. It's a bit like throwing a surprise party and then setting the house on fire to make sure no one talks about it. His paranoia-fueled murder spree turned a brilliant crime into a bloodbath that screamed, "Hey FBI, look over here!" 22. Nicky Scarfo, the boss of the Philadelphia crime family, was not a man known for his calm and rational leadership style. He was a walking, talking bundle of paranoia and rage. His management philosophy was simple. If you even suspect someone might be disloyal, you kill them. If they look at you funny, you kill them. If they bring you the wrong kind of coffee, you probably kill them. This strategy had an predictable yet apparently unforeseen side effect. His own men became so terrified of his erratic behavior that they started lining up to become government informants. It was a simple choice: face almost certain death for a minor mistake, or get a new identity and a nice, quiet life in Arizona. Scarfo didn't just dismantle his own family, he personally gift-wrapped them for the prosecution. 23. The 'Ndrangheta, one of Italy's most powerful mafias, is known for its global reach and ruthless tactics. They're also apparently aspiring food scammers. One clan decided to branch out into the lucrative world of high-end olive oil. Their brilliant plan was to buy cheap, low-grade sunflower oil from Turkey, ship it to Italy, add some chlorophyll for color, and then sell it as premium, extra virgin olive oil to unsuspecting customers in America. The scam ran for years, making them millions. And what brought it all crashing down? Not a brilliant detective, but a food critic. An American food blogger with a discerning palate tasted their premium oil and basically said, "This tastes like garbage." That one bad review triggered an investigation that unraveled the entire international operation. They were taken down by a foodie. 24. Thomas. Tommy Karate. Pitera was not your average mob hitman. He was an artist of his craft, a connoisseur of killing. He was also, unfortunately for him, a meticulous record keeper. Pitera was obsessed with documenting his work, and he kept detailed manuals and diaries describing his murder techniques, body disposal methods, and the tools of his trade. When the feds finally raided his home, they found a treasure trove of self-incrimination. It was like he had written his own prosecution strategy for them. He had how-to guides for murder, complete with notes and personal reflections. He wasn't just a killer. He was a killer who wanted to make sure he got full credit for his work. His obsession with his own dark craft made him the star witness in his own trial. 25. In today's digital age, even mob fugitives want to become content creators. Mark Fenclaude BR, a member of the Indrangetta on the run for years, decided to start a cooking channel on YouTube. He was clever enough to always hide his face, ensuring he remained anonymous while showing off his masterful Italian recipes. But he made one critical, very specific mistake. While passionately preparing a pasta dish, he exposed his arms to the camera, revealing his distinctive tattoos. He might as well have held up his driver's license. The police, who were probably subscribed to his channel for the recipes, recognized the unique ink immediately. He was apprehended not because of a slip of the tongue, but because of a slip of the sleeve. His passion for pasta led directly to his capture, proving once again that carbs can be a killer. 26. Carmine the Snake. Persico, the longtime boss of the Colombo crime family, was a man of immense self-confidence. He believed he was smarter than the cops, smarter than the feds, and certainly smarter than any lawyer. So when he was facing a massive racketeering trial that could put him away for life, he made a bold decision. He would represent himself. Acting as his own attorney, the Snake got to cross-examine witnesses and make impassioned speeches to the jury. The only problem was, he was a terrible lawyer. His legal strategy was a train wreck of epic proportions. The jury was not impressed by his courtroom antics, and he was found guilty on all counts, earning himself a sentence of 139 years in prison. He played himself, and in doing so, secured a permanent residency in a federal penitentiary. 27. Anthony Gaspipe. Casso was a feared underboss in the Lucchese family, known for his violent temper. He was also, it turns out, astonishingly bad at his job. Over the course of his career, he allegedly attempted to carry out 11 different mob hits. The result? 11 failures. He couldn't kill a single target he was assigned. This man's incompetence was legendary. He was less of a deadly assassin and more of a walking, talking argument for gun control. At a certain point, you have to wonder if his target survived out of sheer luck, or if Gaspipe was just catastrophically inept. His nickname should have been the Misfire. He was living proof that being a high-ranking mobster doesn't necessarily mean you're actually good at any of the mobster stuff. 28. Life imitates art, and sometimes life complains about art on an FBI wiretap. The DeCavalcante family, the New Jersey-based crew widely believed to be the real-life inspiration for The Sopranos, were apparently big fans of the show. They were also very critical viewers. The FBI had their social club bugged, and they captured hours of recordings of these real mobsters complaining about the show's inaccuracies. They'd argue about character portrayals, plot points, and whether a real wise guy would ever go to therapy. While they were busy playing TV critics and dissecting the life of Tony Soprano, they were simultaneously confessing to their own real-life crimes. They were so wrapped up in the fictional version of their lives that they completely forgot their own lives were being recorded for a much less forgiving audience. 29. Frank Funzi. Tiri, a boss of the Genovese family, tried to pull off a classic move to avoid the heat from the feds. He faked being a sick, decrepit old man. He claimed he was retired, frail, and suffering from all sorts of ailments, essentially arguing he was too feeble for prison. He would show up to court appearances looking like he was on death's door, barely able to walk. It was a decent performance, but the FBI had surveillance footage that told a different story. Their cameras caught the frail old man running up and down stairs, barking orders, and actively running his criminal empire like a man half his age. His act was exposed as a complete sham. He wasn't a feeble retiree. He was just a lazy actor who couldn't even commit to the role when he thought no one was watching. 30. Carlo Gambino was one of the most powerful and influential mob bosses in American history, the head of the sprawling Gambino crime family. His public persona, however, was that of a humble, simple man. He often pottered around his garden, dressed like a simple peasant farmer, cultivating an image of a harmless old Italian immigrant. This humble gardener act was his greatest disguise. The only problem was that this simple gardener, who supposedly lived a modest life, was regularly seen hopping into a brand new, top-of-the-line Cadillac to drive to his gardening appointments. The contrast was so ridiculous it was almost insulting. It was the mob equivalent of a billionaire pretending to be homeless but still wearing a Rolex. The humble act didn't fool the FBI for a second. 31. Transporting illegal goods like weapons and drugs is a risky business, so the Camorra came up with what they thought was a genius plan. To move their contraband without suspicion, they would stage elaborate fake funeral processions. They'd load up a coffin with guns instead of a body, hire some fake mourners to cry on cue, and drive slowly through town, immune from police stops. It was a brilliant idea at first, but their cost-cutting measures became their downfall. To save money, they started recycling the same dead guy for multiple funerals, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. Local police eventually noticed that the same grieving family and the same deceased individual were having a funeral every other day. The scheme was so absurdly repetitive, it practically screamed for attention. 32. When you're a wanted member of the Camorra, with a rap sheet full of serious violent crimes, you'd think your top priority would be to maintain a low profile. You'd avoid any and all contact with the law. But one fugitive, Frank Tiri, apparently forgot this basic rule. While on the run for major offenses, he was caught red-handed in a supermarket. His crime? He was trying to shoplift 2 large wheels of Parmesan cheese. This wasn't a desperate act of hunger. It was a moment of pure, inexplicable stupidity. He risked his freedom, his entire life on the lam, for a bit of cheese. The police who arrested him must have been stunned. They were looking for a dangerous mafioso and instead found a petty dairy thief. It was the most anticlimactic end to a manhunt in Italian history. 33. Poisoning a rival is a classic mob move, a timeless method for dealing with your enemies. It requires precision, stealth, and, most importantly, making sure you poison the correct person. The Lucchese crime family, in one of their less brilliant moments, failed spectacularly on that last point. During a tense sit-down with a rival crew, they planned to poison the enemy boss's dinner plate. The plan was flawless, the poison was potent, everything was set. But in a moment of sheer, unadulterated incompetence, a mix-up occurred. The poisoned plate didn't go to the rival boss. Instead, it was served to one of their own high-ranking members. They successfully executed a perfect hit on themselves. You can just imagine the panic and whispered accusations at the table as their own guy started choking on his spaghetti. It wasn't just a failed hit. It was a self-inflicted wound of such epic stupidity that it deserves a place in the Moron Hall of Fame. Criminal masterminds? Nice myth. Turns out most mobsters were just reckless guys with guns and zero critical thinking. So what really fueled the Mafia? Strategy or sheer chaos? Drop your take in the comments. And if history being dumber than fiction is your thing, hit like and subscribe. There's a lot more coming.